to thank you guys for being here and watching this film.
I'm here because I loved the movie, and I just was so taken by you and all your crew that you got together, and so I'm grateful to share this experience with you, and I'm such a fan of what you've done. How did you get hooked on this? What was your inception point?
I grew up with wild horses and horses in general, and when I discovered the plight of wild horses in my late 20s, when I was brought aboard to write and direct Black Beauty, it was very important to me to honor Anna Siebel's themes in that story. And she didn't necessarily write Black Beauty as a children's book. Anna Siebel wrote Black Beauty because she was crippled as a child, and she was literally carried by horses, and that inspired her very unique understanding and her great love of them. And so she wrote Black Beauty as an animal welfare plea for the horses of her time, the cab horses, the carriage horses that needed voices. And so in finally understanding that, as I was brought aboard to recreate Black Beauty for audiences of today, I really wanted to find a parallel and to honor an animal welfare plea for the horses of our time. And that's when I discovered the plight of wild horses. And I was so shocked and enraged that as a horse person in my youth that I didn't know that this was going on in our country. And so I started talking about it, and I realized how few people knew. And so after we intertwined those themes into Black Beauty, which thankfully was acquired by Disney and was seen by millions of children and families around the world, my husband and I and my brother, who's in the audience, and our amazing cinematographer Kai, and our crew, my parents, as you saw in the film, we decided to keep going to try to raise awareness for a little known issue before wild horses are lost to history.
Thank you. Wild Beauty is similar to Blackfish or The Cove in the sense that it's a journalistic expose of the unconscionable and unethical treatment of wild species. 5 years creating this film? What were some of the most challenging aspects? I mean, I know a lot of it is on film for our benefit, but also, you know, the incredible moments of beauty along the road. You want to share a story that maybe is not on the film there? I mean,
sure. I mean,
microphone.
Some of the most difficult moments were obviously with the Bureau of Land Management. The conversation with Gus War at the end of the film during the Roundup of the Anarchy was an hour and a half. And law enforcement, it was interesting questioning law enforcement during that roundup when we were being denied our right to observe, and asking law enforcement who they were there to essentially, protect. It was the Bureau of Land Management. For any advocates that might have gone a little bit rogue, you get very emotional in those situations, obviously with the horses. I like to say that we didn't show the worst that we saw, because it's very hard to see horses with broken legs and broken necks. But it was interesting when law enforcement basically stated that they were solely there for the Bureau of Land Management's benefit and not for the citizens that were also there or for our safety. And taking that position I thought was very interesting. But one of the most challenging things really was editing the film over the course of 4 years of filming, and so much footage and so much beauty, so much resplendent beauty, and that's what we're fighting so hard to protect. But trying to discover the narrative, because in the very beginning, and all films change, but with this film, we had outlines, and I knew some of the information that I wanted to get out to people, and there's so much, so clarifying that so that it's not confusing. But our original vision for this was really more of an indie Planet Earth. We thought we would have some great celebrity narrator or to tell the story, and it wasn't until I sat down to start editing that I started writing the narration, and I originally wrote it for somebody else. But the story became more journalistic as we went along. It became bolder. I'm not really a very confrontational person, but when you see such profound injustice happening before your eyes for years, eventually you start raising your voice. And that's what ended up happening. And those two iconic herds that got rounded up, the San Wash Basin horses of Colorado, the Anarchy in Utah, that are in Black Beauty, that millions of kids fell in love with, that was just enough. And over those years, the lives that we recorded and documented, we just got bolder. So But the beautiful moments were what you saw in the film, these days that we would hike out into the wild and suddenly the air was flecked with gold and horses are all around us breathing and existing. And it was that tonic of wildness that was the most special about filming the project.
Thank you for bringing us there with you. So your family went undercover in the auction in Texas, which is pretty homespun and amazing, and we really went in with you. How would you describe verbally now the problem with what they're saying about what they're doing when you're on the inside there? What do the cowboys feel about it?
Well, there very much was a kind of sit down, little lady, go, stop trying to do what you're doing mentality. That was the chauvinism that we encountered was really apparent. But with going undercover into the slaughter pipeline, which was really unnerving, just, I had this little DJI pocket camera and the gimbal kept getting stuck in my purse and it just wasn't working. It kept beeping in the middle of the auction. So my brother, he wore that button cam, and it was, not that any part of this was funny, but I'll never forget, Rick, I don't know where you're sitting in the audience, but there you are. He was sitting in the auction doing this, and you were kind of like a little human swivel. Yeah. And we're in there at 6 a.m. and that was, everybody knew that we weren't supposed to be there. And like, Rick, just kind of try to look. But you did a great job because we've got that footage.
The can was a great diversion.
Yeah, you did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
That's true. But the Bureau of Land Management, they have something called the Adoption Incentive Program, and if you see anything about wild horse adoptions, they say, oh, it's so great, we're adopting these horses out. There are over 60,000 wild horses and burros in these holding facilities, and as I say in the film, some of them don't have shade, some of them get flooded by water. I mean, the conditions of some of those facilities are abhorrent. And so they claim that there are a lot of adoptions. There are some, and some of those horses are amazing. Some of them become police horses, they become therapy horses. But it's expensive to adopt and gentle a wild horse.
I imagine they're traumatized by helicopters the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't want to be on a horse with a helicopter in the sky if they had that memory.
No, absolutely.
But anyway.
Yeah, and some of those horses become very one-person horses. Mm-hmm. But what is broken is that adoption incentive program incentivizes people to go adopt a wild horse for $25 and then hold them for a year, throw them out to pasture. Then they get $1,000 from the government, then they flip them into auction at slaughter, and they're illegally shipped across the border to Canada and Mexico.
Who's paying for all this?
We are. We're paying for the cruelty and the unknowingly.
And the helicopter crews.
The helicopter crews and the millions of dollars that are being awarded to these helicopter contractors. And I certainly don't want my hard-earned tax dollars to go toward wild horse roundups. So it's important for us to know that and to start raising.
Pens too? And
the holding pens as well, the holding facilities. It costs a lot of money to feed a horse for the rest of its life, especially 60,000 of them.
Wow. It was stated many times by the wonderful children in the film what the wild American horse represents.
Freedom and spirit and the wild that I think all of us should go out and experience, not just see, but experience. Getting to spend weeks and months on end out there without seeing a major city for a little while, it was just extremely clarifying. And horses do represent freedom. Horses helped us build our country on their backs, and wild horses are supposed to be federally protected. And they evolved on this continent 55 million years ago. They're part of that natural assemblage, and they deserve to be here. And they're also important for disseminating seeds and the way that their digestive system works. Even they are able to spread seeds, which enrich the soil, diversify the soil. It gives extra moisture to the soil, which helps prevent wildfires. There are a number of reasons why wild horses are meant to be where they are and free on the range.
Is the Bureau of Land Management, are they listening? Are they listening to the people? Do they care about what the public is saying? Do they respond to the public at all?
It certainly doesn't feel like they are. I feel like the Bureau of Land Management, they're not even getting their wrists slapped. And that's part of the purpose of this film. to illuminate what they're doing. And the level of cruelty of these roundups is just really unbelievable. I don't know how in 2023 we're chasing a federally protected flight animal with a chopper at eye level in 100-degree heat, making these horses. And these foals, these day-old babies, run multiple Kentucky Derbies. And again, we're very selective about the injuries that we show in the film, because for Jocelyn, for the younger generation, it's really important to be able to watch this film and not shut it off. But these little foals, they run their hooves off. And a lot of these horses get euthanized. I mean, it's really, but in short, no, the Bureau of Land Management, in my opinion, is not listening to the people, but it needs to listen to the people. And again, that's part of the reason that we made this film.
Can you speak a little bit to the misinformation and disinformation as to why this is being done?
Well, in 2019, when we filmed our first roundup, as a filmmaker that's come up with independent films and being scrappy and wearing a lot of hats, I was really shocked when there was a publicist for a federal agency on top of a mountain, and it took 3.5 hours to get out there. We left at 4 a.m. and I thought, how in the hell is there a publicist for the Bureau of Land Management on top of this mountain right now, telling me, and reading essentially. What's disturbing and really distressing is that they're very effective. And they, having been to these numerous roundups now, all of these publicists almost sound like they're reading from a script. And they part out the media, if media shows up. They part them out and they basically give them all of this misinformation about wild horses. They're starving, they're overpopulated, we're rounding them up for their own good, there's drought. And that's, if people have heard about wild horses, that's often what they're hearing. And on the public relations front, the BLM has released over 1,000 press releases about wild horses since 2010. 1,000, even though their own data has been proven to show that 72% of rangeland degradation is due to cattle. 72% based on their own data, and they're claiming that wild horses are degrading the land. Based on their own data, it's less than 1% of theoretical effect to the land, but they're claiming that it's the wild horse causing problems with rangeland health. That's disinformation.
Can you speak to what you have in mind as far as this getting in front of potential future change of legislation?
Absolutely. So there's a very important bill that has been reintroduced by Congresswoman Dina Titus, who's a huge champion of wild horses. It's called the Wild Horse and Burro Protection Act, HR 3656. And if it passes, it would eliminate the use of helicopters in wild horse roundups. And there's so much wrong with this issue. There's so much that needs to be fixed. Big picture, we need balance on our land. We need a true thriving natural ecological balance. And that means having predators on the land. That means protecting wolves and mountain lions and coyotes and grizzly bears. But where we want to start right now is trying to get this bill passed, because that's just about animal cruelty. And no matter what side of the aisle you're on, I think anyone who's truly empathetic can get behind eliminating helicopters for wild horse roundups in 2023.
Can you share with us your efforts on behalf of children? You're getting young voices into the fight, and this is including the letter writing campaign to Congress, which I saw some of. It's fantastic. Can you speak some more to the future of that?
I love working with kids. They say don't work with animals or children, and I tend to do both a lot, which is so much fun. But I really love connecting with young people, and I think people, particularly in our experience now with lawmakers, people listen to young voices more. People pay attention when a child not just types but writes a letter in kid speak, and that gets sent. And so this wasn't our idea. Velma Johnson in the early 70s started a letter writing campaign, as I touch on in the film, where she got thousands of letters by children across the country, and they were sent to Nixon. And that inspired the 1971 Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act. It was kids. So that's what we're trying to do now with modern day through social media, but still having kids write those actual letters. So we're actually about to release a video encouraging kids nationwide to join that movement, which is called I Stand With Wild Horses. And we hope that that helps in this fight.
Well, that'd be great. I remember reading Black Beauty when I was, I don't know, 9 or something, and being a city kid and thinking about the horses that are still at, Central Park in New York City. Talk about empathy. It's everywhere. You can have empathy even if you've never met a horse or seen one in person, and if you have, it's ineffable and it's indelible. What would you like people who are moved by Wild Beauty to do, to help? How can we be of service today for this cause?
To talk about it. We're sincerely hoping that Wild Beauty can become Blackfish or The Cove and do what those films did for their respective species. So if you're moved by the film, please post the trailer, please post about the issue, and if you want to take a step further, please contact your representatives and tell them to please support the Wild Horse and Burro Protection Act. And if that bill can get passed, that's a first major step in setting a precedent to actually doing something to change this when nothing has really occurred to move the needle for wild horses in very, very long. So post about it, please talk about it, and call your representatives.
Yes, please do help spread the word about Wild Beauty, Mustang Spirit of the West. Love this film, love what you've done.
Thank you.
And I stand with wild horses.
Thank you so much.